Good morning, and we're going to start the day off with going over some more factoring. This is the Algebra 2 review, and if you see by the previous videos, we touched on factoring, and we're going to do nothing but factoring trinomials with this video because this is one of the staples that you have to have in order to be successful. These methods of factoring will follow you throughout your whole academic career, whether you're in, a history major, you only have one or two maths, or if you're in a science or mathematics major or an engineering major, it's going to follow you all the way to thermodynamics and electricity and all of those courses that are in the engineering and sciences. So these are very, very, very important. Okay, there's several ways of factoring. Now, when you factor a trinomial, when you factor a quadratic, you're basically finding the X intercepts. When you factor a quadratic, you are basically finding the X intercepts. They're called solutions, but you're finding the X intercepts of the parabola. And in a vertical and horizontal section, we talk about that, but your parabola is going to look something like this, and you're finding these 2 points. Okay, now they're called solutions because it is an equation, so you're finding solutions, but in the graphical representation, you're finding the x-intercepts. Sometimes you have 2 x-intercepts. That's when hold on just a second, that's when you take the square root of a positive number. You're going to have 2 x-intercepts. When you take the square root of a negative, and we talk about this in the section of vertical and horizontal shifts and everything, you find when you take the square root of a negative, you don't have any x-intercepts. It could be going up like this, it could be going down like this, but the whole point is it doesn't cross the x-axis. And then, of course, when you take the square root of 0, it's sitting on the x-axis, like that. You only have 1 x-intercept. So this is called the radicand, but it's also called, we'll get into it with the vertical and horizontal shift. It's called the radicand when it's under the radical, and I can't, we'll get into the other later on when we do the vertical and horizontal shifts. All right, so when we factor a quadratic, in the previous review, the Algebra 1 review, we basically factored a little bit with reverse FOIL. And that's when something is factorable, kind of like 54. 54 is 6 times 9. That's factorable. But 3 is not factorable, so you have to use the prime factorization, which is 1 and 3. So reverse FOIL, and we use 3 of the shortcuts. And when I say shortcuts, if you haven't seen the previous video, that's a plus b quantity squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. A minus b quantity squared is equal to a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. And a squared minus b squared is equal to a plus b times a minus b. Those are what I call the 3 shortcuts. Now we're going to add 2 more to that in this video, but that's one way of factoring. Using reverse FOIL when something is factorable. 2, using the shortcuts that we've gone over so far. Now, that's if something is factorable. If something is factorable, then you use these 2. We've also got the quadratic formula. I use the quadratic formula, and I tell students to use the quadratic formula whenever you're dealing with a quadratic made up of decimals. Whew. Whenever you have a quadratic made up with decimals. Because it's hard to factor decimals, and it sure is hard to complete the square with decimals. So I tell students to use x is equal to negative b. Oh well, we'll get to that. Oh, we'll do that. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, we'll go over that. And the last, and what I use all the time, and I tell students to use all the time, is complete the square. Now, the reason I use complete the square all the time is for several reasons. One, it uses basic math. Two, I use it for it also gives us the X intercepts as well as the vertex. Okay? And I also use it because of the thinking, the methodical thinking that you're doing. Okay, so I kind of consider completing the square kind of the thing to teach my students, because technically, if you can do completing the square, you can do just about anything I give you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that as a teacher, I teach this more than I teach the other. But in order to understand completing the square, you're going to have to understand this, and that's where we go from there. So when I put problems on the board, most of the time, after I go over reverse FOIL and the shortcuts, after I do that, I jump into completing the square. Well, Hubert, why don't you use quadratic formula? Well, I have found that students have been drilled in the head to use the quadratic formula for everything. And that is not what the quadratic formula is used for. In my opinion, the quadratic formula is used to use, let's say, 2.1 x squared plus 3.6x minus 2.1 is equal to 0. That's when you should use, in my opinion, that's when you should use the quadratic formula. And when you're in algebra and you're doing a lot of repetitive learn the completing the square or reverse FOL, you usually don't have too many of the decimals, and when you do, you just plug it into the quadratic formula. So there is a use for the quadratic formula, but I just don't use it very often. I just tell students to use it whenever you have a quadratic with a decimal. So we'll get to all that in just a minute, and you can change that. You can change it, multiply by 10 on both sides. But that will give you bigger numbers, and you may not want to do that. And like I said, I'm just a complete the square teacher, and I like to teach that. And I find that students do better in calculus when they have that completing the square under their belt. So it kind of helps to have that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put some problems on the board, and we're going to work out some reverse FOIL because that's important. Then we're going to do number 4 and 5. And then we're going to move into completing the square. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started on reverse FOIL. Let me go ahead and make this transparent. I've got some problems on a worksheet pulled up. I hope they come up. And we'll work on some right now. There's one. And notice that these, and remember, the quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Well, these are not equal to 0, but that's the basic form of the quadratic equation. And when a is equal to 1, that's what these problems are. There's two types of quadratics. There is a is equal to 1 and a is greater than 1. Or a is not equal to 1, whichever one you want to call it. So, with this being said, I'm going to go ahead and start the first one. Parentheses, draw two sets of parentheses. You know that this is going to be P and P because when a is equal to 1, you're just going to have your variable here and your variable here. Then I'm going to break up 48. 48 is 1 times 48, 2 times 24, 4 times 12, well, 3 times 16, I believe, 3 times 16, 4 times 12, 5, 6 times 8. Okay? Now, I've got to find a multiple of 14 because that's in the middle. 1 and 48 will give me a 49 or a 47, so that's not going to work. 2 and 24 will give me a 22 or a 26. And right now people are going, well, how are you doing that? Well, how do you get, remember the FOIL method? F-O-I-L. You use multiplication for the F, first times the first. You use multiplication for the last, but how do you get, what do you do with the outside and the inside term most of the time? You add them. So what I'm doing is I'm adding these two numbers to get, see if I get a 14. So 16 and 3 will give me a 19 and a 13. Well, that's pretty close. 19 and 13 doesn't work though. 12 and 4 will give me an 8 and a 16. No, that won't work. And 6 and 8 will give me a 2 or a 14. So we're going to put a 6 right here, and we're going to put an 8 right there. Now, this says a plus. So that means the largest number has to be a positive. So what's larger? 8. Remember, outside, inside. What's larger? 8 or 6? 8. So it gets a positive. What does this mean? Like or unlike? That means like. So if that's a positive, that's a positive. So your answer is P plus 6, P plus 8. So let's do number 2 now. Number 2. You set a big set of parentheses. N and N. 16. 1 and 16. 2 and 8. And that's it. So 1 and 16 will give me a 17 or a 15. 2 and 8 will give me a 10 or a 6. What do we want? We want a 10. So that means 2 and 8. This number is positive, so that means the 8 has to be positive. This number is like, so if this one is positive, this one's got to be positive. So let's do another one. P and P, and let's do, I'm going to erase this over here so I can write I know it's hard to see with it being, but I can write in white. Let's see. There we go. Then I have to change it back. All right, so 40 is 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 3, 4 and 10, 5 and 8, 6, 7, okay. Now, 1 and 40 will give me a 41 or a 39. We need a 14. 2 and 20 will give me a 22 or a 18. 4 and 10 will give me, oh, there we go, 4 and 10. So 4 will go here and 10 will go there. Now, the 14 is positive, so that means the 10 has to be positive. The 40 is like positive, so that means like, so that means this is positive. I don't know why I keep getting arbitrary marks coming up. I apologize for that, but there we go. All right, now R. R and R. 1 and 18, let me erase this over here. Oops, I didn't think my screen was maximized. My screen's not even maximized. Hold on a second, folks. This might make it a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. 1 and 18 will give me a 19 or a 17. 2 and 9 will give me an 11 or a 7. 3 and 6 will give me a 3 or a 9. What do we need? We need a 9, so that means 3 and 6. So a 3 here and a 6 here. This sign means that my 6 is going to be positive. This right here means like. So if this is positive, this has got to be positive. Now, the reason I'm just going through and I'm doing it each time, is because I want you to see the method. And then I'll write down the method here in just a second. Break up the P's, or I'm sorry, 2 sets of parentheses. Break up the P's. This one's going to be simple because 7 is prime. 7 is prime, so you just put a 1 here and a 7 here. What does this mean? Uh-oh, that means the biggest number has to be negative, so that means 7 is negative. What does this mean? Like or unlike? It means like, so if this is negative, this has got to be negative. So there's your answer. Let's go over here, and I'm going to erase this. And I might write over here. All right, 14. 1 and 14, 2 and 7. 1 and 14 will give me a 15 or a 13. 2 and 7 will give me a 9 or a 5. What do we need? We need a 9, so it's going to be 2 and 7. So parentheses, parentheses, B, B, 2 and 7. This right here means that the 7 has to be negative. And this right here means like. So if this is negative, this has got to be negative. And let's do the last two. I'm just going to do 8 because I need to move on to the next section. And remember, I'm not teaching you this for the first time. This is a review video, so you should have seen this before. So I figure 8 problems of each would be good enough. It should be. All right, break this up. B, B. Okay, the multiples of 15 are, let me erase all this. Turn on my handy dandy white. Okay, 1, 15, 3, 5. 1 and 15 will give me a 16 or a 14. 3 and 5 will give me an 8 or a 2. We need an 8. Good job, Hubert. So that means 3 and 5. Now, we need a negative, so that means 5 has to be negative. This means like. So that means if this is a negative, this has got to be a negative. And we'll erase this side. Here we got 63. 63, 1 and 63. 2, no, 3. 3 will go into 63 21 times. 4, no, 5, no, 6, no, 7 times 9. 1 and 63 will give me a 64 or a 62, sorry. 3 and 21 will give me a 24 or a, what, 18? 7 and 9 will give me a 16 or a, I'm sorry, yeah, or a 2. What do we need? We need a 16, so it's going to be 7 and 9. 7 and 9, so we put a 7 here, and a 9 here, and an M here, and an M here. This is negative, so that means the biggest number has to be negative. And this is a positive, so that means like sign. Now, just to make sure, let's move down and let's do 2 more. Because I'm a nice guy, I'll do 2 more. Let's do 2 more. I'll bring it up, and that way you can. There's 4. You got 4. We'll go ahead and do 4. All right. So, because you see, they're not that difficult, but people don't know how to do them because they've never been taught right, or they didn't listen when they were taught. One of the 2. So, parentheses. There's a K there. There's a K there. Take my white pen over here where it's out of the way. 1, 60, 2, 30, 3, 20. 4 will go in there, what, 15 times? 5 will go in there 12 times. 6 will go in there 10 times. And I won't stop there because 6, 7, 8, I think that's it. So we need, okay, this 1 and 60, that'll give me a 61 or a 59. That's not going to work. 2 and 30 give me a 32 or a 28. That ain't going to work. 3 and 20 gives me a 23 or 17. 4 and 15 give me a 19 or an 11. 5 and 12 will give me a 17 or a 7. We need a 4, so it's going to be 6 and 10. Now, a lot of people say, well, Hubert, I could have told you that. Well, sometimes they give you a problem that you don't think of. That middle term may be a 32 or a 28, and you got to go, and you're thinking 6 times 10, and you don't know how to get it. So you need to write down all of your multiples. So I'm going to put a 6 here and a 10 here. This means the biggest number has to be negative. And this means unlike. So if it's unlike and this is negative, then this has got to be positive. All right, let's do number 10. Parentheses. X, or M, and M. Now, you got to be careful with this one because this one will get you. 1 and 6, 2 and 3. And most of y'all will think, oh, that's easy. That's 1 and 6. No, it's not. Because 1 and 6 will give you a 7 or a 5. 2 and 3 will give you a 5 or a 1. You want a 1 in the middle. So it's 2 and 3. This one is one that teachers put on a test because students think they know how to do it and they end up getting it wrong. So this is a 2 and a 3. This means that the largest number has to be positive. This means unlike. There's your answer. Two more. I'm gonna erase this, and I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna let you pause the video, and I want you to do the last 2. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. And move that over. There we go. So, how'd you do? P and P. And then I'm going to go up here, 1 and 15, 3 and 5. 1 and 15 will give me a 14 or a 16. 3 and 5 will give me an 8 or a 2. We need a 2, so it's going to be 3 and 5. We need a negative 2, so that means the 5 is going to be negative because it's bigger. And then this means unlike, so if that's negative, this is going to be positive. And let's check this one. Parentheses, Got an R here and an R here. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. That'll give us a 21 or a 19. This will give us a 12 or an 8. This will give us a 9 or a 1. We want a 1, so this is going to be 4 and 9. This means that the biggest number has to be positive, and this means unlike. So your answer is R minus 4 times R plus 9. Now, one of the tricks of factoring is that you need to know when to do what. So these next problems, you may not want to start them yet because I'm just going to do a couple of these. We'll just do those 4 right there. Or let's see, there's 6. Now look at the directions. The directions say factor completely, but make sure you factor out a common term first. If you look at these, the first thing you're going to think of is, wait a minute, I can factor out a 3 here, and that'll give me R squared plus 7R plus 10, and now you've got a quadratic right here that we just factored 10 or 12 of those. I can't remember how many we did, but you should be able to factor that. Parentheses, parentheses, R, R. Let's go with 10. That would be 1 and 10, 2 and 5. So 7, 2 and 5. This number is positive, so that means 5 has to be positive. This means like, so there's your answer. Okay, here we factor out a common term of 2. That'll give me p squared plus 7p plus 12, and of course 2 sets of parentheses, p, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and of course we need a 7, so 4 plus 3 is 7, so 3 and 4. This means that the 4 has to be positive. This means like signs, so that's positive. Now I'm not going to do all 4 of these, but I'm going to let you pause the video and write down those 4, and you should be able to get the answers because we did the 12 above that, and I'm sure after doing 12 of those, you should be able to do those 4 right there. Okay? Now, we have just done the reverse FOIL when A is equal to 1. So I'm going to go to the handy-dandy whiteboard, and we just did reverse FOIL with A equal 1. Now, I'm going to do a list of what you should do on these problems, okay? I'm going to draw a line here. 1, factor out a common term first, okay? Just like we did in those last 2 problems, make sure that you can factor out a common term or not. 2, draw 2 sets of parentheses. 3, break up first term starting with 1. Oops. Now I put starting with 1. When A is equal to 1, you don't have to worry about this part. Okay? But when A is not equal to 1, which we're fixing to go into, that's a very important part. Break up last term. Oh, I can't spell today. Break up last term starting with 1. Five, look for OI combo Remember the OI? FOIL, F-O-I-L? Make sure you look for the OI combo to get middle coefficient. I didn't say anything about sign. Okay? And then 5 and 6 talk about the sign. 6 and 7. 6, look at middle term. Look at middle term. The sign of the middle term goes with the largest number of your O and I. So whichever is your largest number with the OI, it gets that sign. And then 7, look at the last term. Look at last term, and it's either like, positive, or unlike, negative. So, and I'll just go through this right quick. You got x squared plus 4 plus, plus x plus 2. No, be minus 2. Let me erase that because that looks funky. There we go. Minus. So break up the first term, starting with 1, so it'll be x and x. Now, if this right here is a number greater than 1, then that's going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to get into that in just a few minutes. Break up the last term, starting with 1. In this case, it's 1 and 2. It's a prime number, so you can't mess that up. 1 and 2. Now, look at the middle term. I'm going to do this in red. Right here. Look at the middle term. I'm sorry, I messed that up. Look at the middle term sign. Right here. Now, to get that sign, you had to do the OI. You had to combine the OI. So that means you had to add. So therefore, the largest number of the O and the I get that sign. So which is bigger, 2 or 1? 2. So that 2 gets that sign. Then you look at the sign of the last term. Like or unlike, to get a negative, when you multiply the last times the last, you have to have a negative here, so that means unlike. So if this is positive, that means this is negative. Okay, now that's with A is equal to 1. We just did 10 of those problems, and then we did 2, factor out a common term, and then, so we did 10, 12 of those problems. Okay, now, the next problem that we're going to go over in the reverse FOIL is when A is not equal to 1. And we're still going to follow this same rules. Okay, so the other is reverse FOIL with A being greater, not equal to 1. I don't want to say greater because sometimes they're negative. Okay? Not equal to 1. So let's go back to our handy-dandy homework page, if I can find one. And I think we're going to do this one. Well, for some reason, there. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And pull it over. Okay, so there's number 1. And I cannot factor out anything. So I'm going to have to use the reverse FOIL. So I'm going to draw 2 sets of parentheses here. And here, I'm going to write out 1 times 7. That's not a big deal. And here, 1 times 1. Now, I don't care how you do this. You can do it, however you want to. But I'm going to put the 1 here and the 7 here because I know that 1 times 7 will always give me a 7. And in this case, I can't mess this up because 1 is 1 and 1. So there's no way you're going to mess this up. You're just going to mess up the signs. So this gets a 1m, and this gets a 7m. There we go. And this side is positive. So what's bigger, 7 or 1? I'm sorry. I just messed that up. There we go. Outside and inside. Remember, outside and inside. Which is bigger, 7m or 1m? 7. So you can't put a plus right here, so you have to put it right there. And then, what does this mean? Like or unlike? Unlike, so if this is positive, this has got to be a negative. So your answer to this problem is m plus 1 and 7m minus 1. Now, this is called trial and error. There is no shortcuts. There isn't any, there isn't any trick. You just have to learn to do it. It's kind of like learning how to do an F on the fret of a guitar. It's not easy. Some people, take a long time before they do that. So let's do the next one, number 2. Parentheses. Okay, well again, we've got prime numbers, so it's not going to be that difficult. We're going to put a 1k here and a 3k here. And then we know that this is either 1 or 7 or 1 because of the FOIL method. So let's do 1 and 7. So I'm going to draw a outside and inside. 1k and 7k is 7k. 1 times 3 is what? 3k. So 3k, that's outside and inside. That'll give us a 10 or a 4. What do we need? We need 10. So we can stop there and we can erase the bottom here. And we can put a 1 here and a 7 here. It just worked out to be the first one we did. And what does this mean? That means the largest number has to be negative. What's larger, 7k or 3k? 7k. So the 7 gets the negative. And what does this mean? Like. So your answer here is k minus 1 times 3k minus 7. And how can we check these? By doing the FOIL method. And if you do the FOIL method, you should get the same thing. You should get that. Okay, let's try number 5. I'm going to erase all this right now. So before I erase it, go ahead and stop the video if you need to catch up, and I'll erase it. So let's do number 3. I'm going to break up. And I'm going to use 1x and 5x. Now, why did I do that, Hubert? Because the 5 is a prime number. There's no way to mess up 5.
You have a work email.
So 81. 1 and 81. 3, I think it's 3 and 27. 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 9. Okay? Now that 36 is what we want. But there's no way. So I'm gonna start with the middle because 81 is a big number. And you put that 81 with that 5 or 81 times 1, you're not going to have 36. So I'm not going to start with the outside edges unless this number is very big, like 100 or 80 something. Since it's 36, I'm going to start with the middle here. I'm going to start with a 9 right here and a 9 right here. And I'm going to do outside and inside. So the outside, I get 9x, and the inside, I get 45x. 45 and 9 will give me a 54 and a 36. So we're lucky we got 36 on the first try. So I'm going to erase that little 9, and I'm going to erase that little 9 and put the big 9 and 9. Big 9, big 9. What do we need? We need a negative here. So the biggest number, which is bigger? 1 times 9 or 9 times 5? 9 times 5 is bigger, so the negative goes right there. What does this mean? Like or unlike? This means unlike, so if this is negative, this has got to be positive. How do you check it? Use the FOIL method, and you should get the same thing. All right, number 4. Number 4, I'm going to break it up into 1x and 2x. And then, of course, I've got that 81. And I've already said 81. This is a very small number right here, so I'm going to try 9 and 9 again. Because if I try 81 or 27, that's going to be way too big to get a 9. So I'm going to put a 9 right here and a 9 right here. I'm going to put my outside and my inside. I got 9x and 18x. 9 and 18 will give me a 9 or a 27. So I can get a 9. So this number is a negative, so that means my largest number has to be negative. What's larger, 9 or 18? This is 18, and this is 9. Which is larger? The 18 gets a negative. What does this mean? Like or unlike? Unlike. So if this is negative, then this is positive. And like I say, you can do these all day long. Parentheses, parentheses, 1n, 3n. Now 20 is going to give us a 1 and a 20, a 2 and a 10, and a 4 and a 5. Is this a gigantic number related to the other numbers? No. So I'm probably going to start with 4 and 5. If this number was a 30 or a 40, bigger than both of these, then I might try the 20 and the 10, or the 21 and 2 times 10. But since it's 16, I don't know. I'm going to try it. So I'm going to put a little 4 here and a 5 here, and that's going to give me 5 and 12. Will 5 and 12 give me a 16? No. So I got to switch it. So now I'm going to take my red pen, and just to show you I'm switching it, now I'm going to switch this 5, I'm going to put it right here, and I'm going to put this 4 right here. 15 and 4 won't work. So what do? Well, looks like to me we're going to have to go to the next. 4 and 5 won't work. So now we're going to have to go to 2 and 10. So I'm going to use blue here. I'm going to put a 2 here and a 10 here. That gives me 10. 10 and 6. 10 and 6 will work. 10 and 6 gives us a 16. So I'm going to erase that little one, and I'm going to put a big one. And I'm going to keep it in blue so you can see what I'm doing. And this is the trial and error. Now, we need a negative, so that means what's bigger, 10 or 6? 10 is bigger, so we put a negative there. And what does this mean, like or unlike? That's like. So since this is a negative, we need like signs. That's going to be a negative. And let's do number 6, and then I want you to write down the remaining 4, and you work on those. So number 6, parenthesis, parenthesis, 2r and 2, I always put the smaller number first. 1r turn off the switches. 1R and 2R. Now 30 is 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 times 6. Again, this is fairly small, so I'm going to start with the 5 and the 6. And I'm going to put a 5 here. I'm going to put it in blue. I'm going to put a little 5 here and a 6 here. And I'm going to draw my outside and my inside. That's 10, 10R and 6R. 10R and 6R is not going to give me a 7R. So now I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip and put a 6 here and a 5 here. And 12R and 5R will give me a 7. So, put a big 6 there, and a big 5 there. Now, what do we need? We need a positive. So what's bigger, 5R or 12R? 12R is bigger, so it gets a positive. And this means what? Unlike, so if this is positive, this has got to be negative. And there's 6 problems. So what I want you to do is pause the video and write down those remaining 4 problems. And you should be able, looks like, yeah, you should be able to do those. Now remember, if you've done everything right and you cannot get it, that means it's prime. Let's check 7 through 10. And I'm going to let you write down the answer, okay? 7 through 10. So make sure, let's see, 7 is prime. The rest of them, I'll erase this for you. Look at 7. 7 is prime. So you're not going to be able to factor it, but go ahead and try it. And then 8, 9, and 10. And I want you to, well, I tell you what, I will let you take a picture of that or pause the video. I would probably take a picture of it. I mean, we're going to have worksheets. We have worksheets. But, you know, you might want to take a minute and pause that and take a picture of it so you'll have it. And then I will give you the other problems. I'll let you take a picture of those. If I can get the cursor to work. Okay, we left off with, let's see, I think we did 6, right? Yeah. All right, so there is 7 through, let me erase this. There is 7 through 16. So take a picture of that and pause the video. And we're back, and there is 17 through 18, or 17 through 26. So pause the video. And there is 27 through 30. Now, I will show you number 10, number 28. Or let's do number 27. You've got something different here. So it might take a little bit longer. You got 1x, 4x, 2x, and 2x. Now you've got 4 multiples. And 24 is going to be 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6, and that's it. So I'm trying to think. You need 35 in the middle, and I'm looking to see how in the world you're going to get that. I have no idea. I'm going to go with 2 and 2 in the middle. Now the reason I'm going with 2 and 2 is because it's easier when you have the same number. It's easier to rule it out because you don't have to change anything. So I'm going to go ahead and try the 4 and the 6. 4 and 6. And put my outside and inside. 2 times 6 is 12. 12 and 8 will never give us 35. So I put a 6 here and a 4 here. Now I'm not erasing it because this is what you do. You don't erase it, you just write over it. Okay, that'll be 8 and 12, and again you get the same thing because your 2's don't change. So you can mark out 6 and 4 with the 2's. So I'm just going to do this because that means I've only tried half. All right, let's try 3 and 8. So I'm going to erase the 6 and the 2, and I'm going to put a 3 and an 8. A little 3 and an 8. 8 times 2 is what? 16. 16 and 6, that won't work. So 3 and 8 is out. 12 and 24, I don't think that's going to work because it's too big. But we'll try. I'm sorry, 2 and 12. So I'm going to put a 2 here and a 12 there. 12 is 24 and 4. That won't work. And 24 and 1, that's not going to work. So 2 and 2 is out. So let's try a 4 and 1. If I can get the pen to work. Let's try a 4 and a 1. So 1x, or whatever, and 4x. And I'm going to try a 4 and a 6. A 4 and a 6. That'll give me 6 and 16. Nope, that won't work. We want a 35. Beginning to wonder if this one's prime. So I'm going to try 6 and 4. 6 here, a 6 here, and a 4 here. And that's going to give me 28. So that won't work. So 6 and 4 are out. So let me try 3 and 8. 3 here and an 8 here. 8 and 12 is 20. That's not going to work. So I'm going to try 8 here and a 3 here. 32 and 3, boom, there it is. 32 plus 3 is 35. So that will work. So I'm going to write an 8 here, a big 8, and a 3. What's bigger? 32 or 3? 32 is bigger, so it gets a negative. And then this means like or unlike? This means like. So this, since this is negative, this will be negative. So that, see, that one took a little bit longer. But you got to understand, what are you training your brain for when you take all these maths? If you're heading toward engineering or sciences, you're fixing problems. So you've got to have a brain that knows how to do trial and error. That's why you don't see a lot of art majors or history majors building a bridge. Okay? So make sure you go through these and keep trying. And of course the answers, let me go ahead and give you the answers one more time. Go ahead and make it smaller. There. There's your answers. So go ahead and take a minute, stop the video, take a picture, write them all down, whichever you want to do, and you can work on those additional with. The more problems, the better. You will not get reverse FOIL by just doing 5 or 6 problems. You're not going to get it. So make sure you take a good amount of time, go on the internet, pull up factoring quadratics worksheet PDF. And there's a ton of worksheets out there that you can work on.